港，我印象当中，龙岗是一个我以为是荒山野岭，没想到这2年发展的如此之迅速，非常 impressive。我觉得下午的时间有点长，所以说大家可能累了，我给大家讲2个笑话。这个，昨天我来的时候接我的那个女同学给了我一个小的 pamphlet， 然后那上面有那个龙岗的这个天安数码城的这个介绍，然后那个我打开那个 brochure， 看到了里面说欢迎来到中国的硅谷，然后我在想，其实3个小时前我刚从硅谷来，对吧 ？China 的 another Silicon Valley，right？ 北京，而且还是宇宙中心，因为我是从五道口过来的。It seems that my whole lifetime has been spending time with Silicon Valley, right? Before moving back to China, I spent a lot of time in the regional Silicon Valley, Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. So happy to be in Silicon Valley again. Might be considered the second Silicon Valley of China, right? The second joke, I forgot about the second joke, right? It seems that I can understand all the talks, like all the professionals before me, all the speakers before me, seems to be able to comprehend. That really worries me, I'm not sure you've heard of the one saying by Chairman Mao. The more knowledge you possess, the more reactionary you tend to be. 翻译成中文就是知识越多越反动。So that really concerns me. But anyway, my talk seems to be quite separated from all the previous talks. It's not really about health. It's not about healthcare. It's not about genes, about science. It's really about knowledge. But from another perspective, hopefully, if the more knowledge you possess, potentially you can be more, happier, and that seems to be mental health related. So, without further ado, I'm gonna start covering today's topic: machine-augmented human knowledge for infotainment. So the keyword is machine augmentation, and that's really AI related. And the second part is information plus entertainment. Okay, can you guys really recognize what this is? This is the mind of the human knowledge system. So it probably makes more sense if you have had a chance to look at the first encyclopedia effort by French. That was the late 18th century, right? And the 2 chief co-editors, they created, this huge tree by the time of, 200 years ago, their understanding about the human knowledge, everything they need to know, everything we need to know about human knowledge. And to take a better look, I converted that tree into the human knowledge map. So essentially, there are 3 major layers: memory, reasoning, and imagination. And plus, the contents that French philosophers and mathematicians, they probably don't understand, because I do blend the Chinese contents, like Jing Shi Zi Ji. But I have to mention that in terms of the history of this encyclopedia, there are much earlier efforts from China. The earliest that we can trace is called the Song Big Four, right? Song 四大书. If you guys ever heard of it, probably even like many Chinese audience, they never heard of that. But internationally recognized, the earliest effort was actually Ming dynasties from the Yongle, that period. That's about like 600 to 700 years ago, Yongle Dadian. And the French encyclopedia, that's 250 years ago. And about at the same time, from the Qing dynasty, 2 years trailing the French edition, that's the 四库全书, right? So when we fast forward to the much recent effort, the UK and US Encyclopedia Britannica and also the Chinese government, and also the enterprises, they have worked on 中国大百科, 互动百科, and also, the online edition, like the Baidu 百科. And the last print copy, or like the DVD edition of the encyclopedia, was actually Microsoft Encarta. When I was a student, when I was in college, I do spend a lot of time on that. But all of these recent effort has turned out to be nothing comparing to the more destructive forces like Wikipedia plus Google. And the main reason is that how information is generated and accessed has totally changed. And the most two recent efforts has really been ongoing effort, and there are local editions, Chinese editions like 互动百科, Baidu 百科, right? Those are great stuff. And so if you look back and from the beginning of the history, people's effort in putting all the knowledge together, China, Europe, and the United States, and this, in terms of search engine, we have Wikipedia plus Google. Wikipedia can be seen as a vertical search engine, right? But that's not the end of the game, right? Things are changing rapidly. A couple years ago, Google acquired a small company called Freebase. Freebase was essentially based on Wikipedia, right? All the wiki resources. And Yahoo has Yahoo Knowledge. Pretty much all the major search engines, they do have some kind of knowledge base or some kind of encyclopedia, online or offline. And the trend seems to be everything needs to be powered by knowledge graph. So that's the main topic today, and I'm going to talk about more later. In my understanding, the best way to comprehend, to digest human knowledge is actually, I coin as a 6W1C. Well, 6W is pretty straightforward, right? When, where, who, what, why, and how. 1C is basically one correlation or connectivity. So from that perspective, everything we know and we believe, things are connected. So in short, everything is connected. All things are connected. So do we know if there are good, data structure that to represent human knowledge? And for instance, we do know time series. Like anything, has a lifespan. At the very beginning, how it comes to be like what it is today, and the end of it, the whole life cycle. And the other data structure can be coined as LBK, location-based knowledge, because a lot of things do have a location, where exactly it happened, and things like wars and many other geographical terms. And also a more complicated data structure is a really graph. We use graph like trees, map, and charts, some kind of a special charts that I'm going to talk about next, to describe the correlations between things and events, and human beings, or a combination of any of these, aforementioned data structures. So giving you guys a couple examples, like the 6W essentially, if we have it's more like, streamlined time, people, event, location, contents, the cause of the, things and the impact. We do have a way to measure knowledge in a very structured way. And of course, hash tables can be also, like key value pairs, can be very efficient in terms of the indexing and search and all this kind of stuff. And RDF graphs, we have all right, there are a lot of information missing. Like we have a couple entities, and you're trying to understand, the correlations between these entities, and you have like RDFs or graphs, or even from NLP, from natural language processing perspective, to describe things in a very human, understandable way. So starting from this page, I'll give you a lot of examples like Kongzi, right, Confucius. The thing seems to prevent me from talking about Confucius. Okay, all right, so if you see the whole lifespan of Confucius, like from the starting point of 552 BC, that one he was born, then all the way to, at the age of 73, he passed away. And one knowledge you probably don't know, like in the Chinese culture, we say 73 84, 阎王不请自己去, right? So, and that's the beginning. At least that's the rumor, the beginning of the rumor, right? 孟子死于84岁, right? 所以说73、84就是用两个圣人的这个他们死亡的逝世的时间，变成了我们这个 Chinese culture 当中的一部分。There are a lot of things happening, during the time span of Confucius. A lot of important things, and the whole thing that he has done over his lifespan, potentially can be structured into things like, his biography, his achievements, and his legacy, his impact and influence, and his important disciples, and also things like, his teachers, and his family tree, and, things behind him, like all the criticism and all those kind of things. And also another way to look at the human knowledge that there's even one book talking about this topic. The two greatest poets from Tang Dynasty, 李白和杜甫。郭沫若曾经有一本书，专门是来讲李白、杜甫他们的时空交汇。So when we really, look at the Wikipedia page talking about Li Bai and also talking about Du Fu, these two guys, from the NLP perspective, right? We do know that they met for 3 times in 2 consecutive years. That's AD 744 and 745. So those are the 2 things we do know, that because at the same time they went to the same spot, the same geolocation, and there are also records indicating these 2 guys spent time together. Another example from the Western world, like Wittgenstein and Bertrand Russell, right? These 2 guys met in Cambridge very affirmatively in 1911, because Wittgenstein became a Bertrand Russell student, right? So the charts on the right are really 2 seahorse charts, and the highlighted part is actually the spot that these 2, famous persons, they met each other. This is a screenshot from a BabelNet. It's called an entity knowledge graph. The beginning of the graph is actually Isaac Newton, and we all know he invented, or at least he's one of the inventors of calculus. And calculus is one, important terms in the history of mathematics. And all these dots, big or small dots with weight on it, are actually part of the algebra graph. The entity, the center of the entity is the algebra. So this is the chart to illustrate that how things are connected and which one has more importance. And if we want to talk about philosophers, there's one way to put the information about philosophers away. It's called constellation. So without too much decorations, these are the real data. Is actually generated from our database, or even can be generated from Wikipedia. It's like the influence map or the influence constellation of all these or some of these philosophers. Or here's another example. I apologize, this page is not bilingual. Like how to correlate important events. There are actually 2 events all happened in Russia 100 years ago. One is called February Revolution. It's also called February Bourgeois democratic revolution. The other, we all know, as Chinese, it's called 十月社会主义大革命, the October Revolution. And so these two things are actually very much correlated because the first event laid the foundation for the second event. And also, if you carefully read the contents of the first event, you do know that 列宁其实是在2月革命当中篡权夺位的。It's a miracle, how Lenin came out to be the leader of the new Russia. But if you read carefully, you can find a lot of things that you probably never pay attention to. And so also for people to understand from the rise of powers perspective, to understand the history of the United States, how do we digest information? So I took the liberty to break the history of the United States down into 5 major pillars: independence and expansion, civil war and reconstruction, industrialization and depression, World War II and Cold War era, and also the civil rights and all the further development which is ongoing right now. And every single period can be further break down into smaller but major impactful events. Then also, if you're trying to understand United States from a Chinese way, I also put things here for your reference. The first 3 pillars can be considered the legalism period of the United States, and the last 2 pillars can be considered the Taoism period, if that's a reasonable way to put it. It's not verified. It's just that I took the liberty to put everything here for your reference. And also talking about another example, the history of LGBT and affirmative action. So that's my that's my favorite comparison. Like if you ever spend time to read all the historical books, all the ancient books in Chinese, you will be amazed. Okay, I'm gonna have to switch to Mandarin here. 比如说在中国的古书当中，《尚书》《战国策》，然后包括《史记》当中，记载了大量的这种，特别是帝王和名人的同性恋的故事，包括双性恋。我们已知历史上的绝大多数的重要的帝王，在我看来，其实都是有双性恋的倾向。比如说秦皇汉武之一的这个汉武帝，然后我这里头应该有一个例子 ，interesting。OK， 在《史记》当中，这个司马迁记载到。非独女以色媚，而仕宦亦有之。后面一句是食焉常与上卧起，这个指的就是当时的一个美男子，叫韩嫣。这个名字非常的容易造成误解啊，以为她是女生，实际上是个男生的名字。上就是汉武帝，所以说这段故事讲的非常的清楚，就是帝王的同性恋，然后还包括这个孔子当年特别中意的这个一个春秋时期的美女，叫这个 God I forgot， 叫魏夫人。她的老公叫卫灵公，卫灵公是一个典型的双性恋，所以说他的一个宠臣，一个美男子叫米子夏，在《战国策》当中和《史记》当中都有这种完整的记载。Okay, and wow, okay, UNESCO. Jumping to UNESCO's World Heritage Sites, okay, Italy has, the single most numbers of WHS. China is trailing Italy by 3, and if you want a, geological view, which is more, direct, able to, you can comprehend it that these are the 48 World Heritage Sites in mainland China, right? You see, that's the layouts. The map can always help you to better comprehend things. And here's another example, Panama Canal. This is part very interesting to me. You know, when I was first look at the chart, initially I thought the canal has to be from has to be east and west, but you would never thought it's a canal from the Atlantic part is actually northwest. Think about it, it's northwest. Atlantic is all the way, from the Chinese perspective, is all the way to the east, and Pacific is on the west, but Pacific is actually on the southeast because that was it's not a peninsula. That was a land bridge connecting Latin America and North America, and also Panama Canal is in American history is the single largest project. They spent about $3.75 million. It's comparable to $8.6 billion now. This is actually nothing comparing to what we spend on the three gauge, right? 三峡工程. So I have to assume there got to be a lot of corruptions when we build, the three gauge. Because there's no reason. Because Panama Canal, in my understanding, is much, much, much bigger than the three gauge project. If you guys understand what I'm talking about. And the pyramid, okay, to talk about the pyramid, before I started, looking at things very attentively, I thought that the oldest, the largest, the tallest, the pyramids all from Egypt. In reality, it's not. Yeah, if we're, taking into account of the Pyongyang Hotel, which is being built, I don't believe North Korean people has the ability to build a pyramid-shaped hotel that tall. Has to be done by the Chinese engineers, architects, right? That's the tallest. And the earliest are actually from Mesopotamia, and it's called a ziggurat, over 5,000 years ago. The tallest ancient pyramids, it does come from Egypt. But the greatest in terms of a volume, the Great Pyramid of Cholula is actually from Mexico, right? It has nothing to do with Egypt or even Mesopotamia. Again, UNESCO's intangible cultural heritage. All right, so this is the part Chinese people can be very proud of. China has 38 intangible cultural heritage. If we really want to bloat that, this is more like an incomplete picture of the things that I consider can be, sucked into the UNESCO's intangible cultural heritage list, but a lot of things are actually not on the list. Sometimes I just don't understand, how we choose, we recommend, the traditions and the ancient cultures to be enlisted in, with the UNESCO, but I just don't understand. But when I look into all the details, I do find certain myth busted. We all know like Korean people are very good at reinventing things. 端午节, right? It's called a Gangnam ritual. The Gangnam ritual is actually, according to Koreans, has nothing to do with the Chinese 端午节, right? Yes, well, 500 years ago, that was maybe the Ming Dynasty of, in China, and it's all identical. All the Korean people, they spend time during that day, during that festival is exactly the same. 纪念屈原. But today everything has changed. They were trying to, I don't know. I think it's all intentionally. They're trying to wipe out all the Chinese influence, and also the Washoko thing from Japan. It just seems to be originated from northern China's culture. It's called Han Shijie. But anyway, we could imagine that all of these things are correlated fundamentally. The whole East Asian cultures are, to a certain extent, was influenced by the Chinese and even in terms of the human race. I mean, for that geolocation. And by studying, looking into this, potentially we can find the correlations in terms of culture, in terms of other physical or even like intellectual connections. And so now we fast forward to the Chronicle of Einstein. So if I ask a question, can you summarize in very simple lines why Einstein is so great, how much impact he has on the human race? So I outlined, all the major things that he has done, all the miracles. Without Einstein, probably we don't have GPS, we don't have CD, DVD, we don't have, all the cameras, and we don't have all the microelectronics, computers, or at least things will be delayed for a couple of years. Or nuclear wars, without the, Americans dropping the 2 atomic bombs, on the mainland of Japan, like maybe today we're still fighting that, anti-Japanese aggression war. I don't know, but we do have a lot of, assumptions that history will be changed without Einstein, right? I spent a lot of time on all the examples of a human knowledge, and then how do we structurize and how do we really put, edit all those messages or store, process, and analyze those human knowledge? I guess I call this is what you see is what you get, a WYSIWYG knowledge editor. At the very beginning, I thought this can be template-based because a lot of things can be summarized in very, templated formats, like people, event, organization, plant creation, and nature. All of things seems to be can be organized in templated forms, and it's very convenient for knowledge ingestion and consumption. But that's definitely not enough. If we're trying to find connections, correlations between different knowledge entities, then we do need knowledge graph. That seems to be the future of search engine, right? And also NLP, that's something highly correlated to knowledge graph. And we do need NLP to enable us to quickly, summarize the structure of any articles, any papers, any books, all those kind of things that are left behind by our ancestors. And the most importantly, we need to have something that can put information in a very infographics way. That way it's much easier, much more convenient for us to ingest. Right, so I thought about 3 ways: map-based entity construction, and also seahorse chart. You see the Wittgenstein and Bertrand Russell 2 charts, 2 seahorse charts, and hierarchical relationship tree, which is a pretty convenient to describe the relationship, like family tree, organizational tree, those kind of things. And that's one example that to talk about the Mongols, right? The family tree of Genghis Khan, and also the impact through generations of his family. And to summarize, from a very 30,000 feet above the ground, there are 2 ways of knowledge consumption: top-down versus bottom-up. In terms of top-down, like you can see there's a sphere. The sphere is the globe of Earth, and and even the constellation, right? And you can zoom in all the way. That's the top-down, or you can categorize into, like any traditional encyclopedia. This way, knowledge can be categorized. You can zoom in, dig into any certain level of details. But the more popular way is bottom-up. Bottom-up is like giving the keywords, give any keywords or any questions, more like, a question and answer system, Q&A system, right? You can search for anything, search for any answers. And that's more direct, more convenient way. And also based on your preference or your history behaviors, the system can intelligently, push things to you, which should sound pretty smart. And in terms of data flow from a big data perspective, this is like how we at Perfect World, we're trying to build human knowledge base or human knowledge engine, search engine. So this is not much different from any other major typical big data system. You have 5 pillars, like from the data flows from all the way from left to the right. You have data sources, you have ingestion layer, you have MNO layer, and that's the management and orchestration layer. You have the insights layer, and at the end of it, it's the action layer. And the whole thing can be formed as a loop. It can be a closed loop. Top down, it also has 4 layers: MNO and data analytics layer, storage and infrastructure layer. So this is another way to put it. How do we architect the whole things? Bottom up, you have the infrastructure, you have data persistence layer, you have different methods of processing data. You have the traditional relational database and NoSQL, and also real-time streaming data. On the left, that's the search engine. Given such a humongous, gigantic database, knowledge database, the only possible way to find anything out of it is the search engine. There's no doubt about it. And on top of all the data processing layer, we have a knowledge graph, and also all kinds of algorithm, targeted for data analysis, and also the rich media editor, which I just talked about. And on top of it is all the application and the presentation layer. We want to highly visualize all the knowledge entities in a very infographic way. Of course, on top of that, there are different kind of potential vertical apps that we can build, and we are building. Okay, so I think we're approaching the very much end of it. The high-dimensional data visualization. I apologize that I wasn't able to, convert everything to bilingual mode. But basically, there are, again, 5 pillars: time series, all the statistical distributions. The third pillar is maps, hierarchies, and networks. There are just basically many ways to visualize knowledge. Basically, all these differences, the difference among all these pillars actually, the position. How do we position things? Size, shape, and color of things. The differences really lie there. In terms of content creation, I gave you that many examples. But basically, in my understanding, there are basically 4 layers of content creation. The core layer is really PGC, can be considered our employees. They are professional editors, and we can also employ or collaborate with PUGC, which is a professional user-generated contents. That's another group of people that can create potentially 10 times of contents than our PGC team. And UGC, this is very typical, like Wikipedia. The entire Wikipedia is actually built by UGC team, right? Their productivity is 10 times more than PUGC. And MGC stands for machine-generated. Machine-generated contents essentially just depends on how much money you have, and the productivity can be 1,000 times stronger than PGC. So basically unlimited. I call this unlimited productivity. All right, so much for today. Thank you for listening.